Emotions can make the continents ring. Yet in all your might and glory, you vanished from the skies, leaving just another story amidst millions of man-made lies. Because of how you fell from the sky.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of the Free American Hour. I'm your host, Clay Douglas. And my guest today is Robert Pelton. And I've known Robert for a long time. He's written a lot of books. Some of them just cookbooks. Some of them about the whole New World Order. Hello, Robert. How are you?
Hey, Clay. Good to hear from you again. It's been a long time.
Yes, sir. Way too long. Matter of fact, you know, your daughters that I took for a ride on my motorcycle, you say they still remember that? Do you still talk about that? They're grown up?
Yeah, they talk about it. They're grown up. They're close to 30 years old. They got kids. I got grandchildren from those little girls that rode your motorcycle. So I don't know. Something about riding a motorcycle does these things. I don't know.
Maybe it's just if you're riding it with Clay Douglas, you know, who knows?
Well, they will never forget Clay Douglas. They think you're the hero to them. You always have, for years, all I heard was Clay Douglas. Have I talked to Clay? Have I seen Clay? That motorcycle ride, that was a thrill of their life at that time for little kids, you know?
Yep. Well.
So you did a good deed, Clay. You know, you did a good deed. You hate to admit you do good deeds, but you did a good deed.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to ruin the reputation the ADL's built up for me, you know?
Oh, I wouldn't want to ruin it either. I had to slip that in, though.
Now, let me ask my audience. Let's take a test from the audience and the people in my chat rooms. What's your treason IQ? What's your treason IQ? If you can answer the following questions, it's higher. If you miss one, well, you should read the McCarthy Chronicles, Part 1, written by my friend Robert Pelton, who was behind Red Chinese soldier, who was behind allowing Red Chinese soldiers to take airborne training at Fort Benning, Georgia. Is this not treason? Why was South Vietnam, South Africa, Rhodesia, and numerous other American friends deliberately betrayed to the forces of evil? Is this not treason? Why was our friend Chiang Kai Shek not so gently coerced into a communist dictatorship by highly placed subversives in the State Department? Is this not treason? Why was Cuba treasonously delivered into the clutches of communist revolutionary Fidel Castro? Is this not treason? Who have untold millions of dollars consistently being used to prop up faltering red dictatorships and to assist communist terrorists in overthrowing faltering red dictatorships and to assist communist terrorists in overthrowing non-communist governments? Is this not treason? What American company sold nuclear reactors to communist-occupied Romania? Is this not treason? And name the country that provided communist Hungary with a factory designed to make 1.5 million light bulbs daily. Is this not treason? What well-known oil company invested $1 billion for oil exploration in communist-occupied Angola? Is that not treason? And can you name the American company who treasonously built and equipped a $10 million electronics plant near Warsaw for the Polish slave labor tyranny? That's quite an impressive list. You know, I volunteered for Vietnam in 1964, Robert. And, but I actually read the Constitution that I took an oath to defend. I don't think many soldiers have done that. Or they might, or at least if they, you know, got to read the Constitution in the little Citizens Rule Book, they would have known that every plank on the Communist Manifesto has been installed in America today.
Yep.
I mean, I tell people a lot, and I've documented a lot of this in my book, Mystery Babylon, along with the CIA drug dealing with the Mossad. You know, and they use the dictators like Noriega, like Saddam Hussein, to do their dirty work. Saddam Hussein was rewarded with the Iraq after he went to war with Iran, Well, actually a little bit before that, but I got McCarthy. McCarthy tried to tell us about this. He tried to warn us, and he made a comment one time to Forrestal, Deputy Secretary of Defense, James Forrestal, and he made a comment about them being stupid, and Forrestal disagreed with him. He said, no, consistency is not the mark of stupidity. If they were just stupid, occasionally they'd make a mistake in our favor. And what happened to McCarthy? I mean, they made McCarthyism into a bad word because some of Roosevelt's best friends were communist. What's going on, Robert?
Well, the thing you got to remember, this started back in the Roosevelt administration, and one of the things that happened was, and this is documented, the term used was, it was like an invasion. A cloud of like locusts came from Harvard. All young lawyers indoctrinated with the Marxist thinking. They came into Washington, were put into positions. Eleanor Roosevelt was one of the, she was one of the people who influenced Franklin quite a bit. She was so far to the left. And in fact, that's interesting because Lyndon Johnson, years later, when he was doing his Great Society program, hey, when John Kennedy was assassinated, Lyndon Johnson got in office. He said, I am further to the left. This is a quote. Look it up. I am further to the left than Eleanor Roosevelt. Well, you can't get much further to the left than Eleanor Roosevelt. Now, you can be polite about it and say, well, she was further to the left, but what really was she? Was she just a socialist? Was she a communist? We don't know that, and we never will know that because the media does not tell the truth. The media is so overwhelmed with left-thinking people. And I would say, without making an accusation, a lot of Reds are in there secretly, a lot of socialists. Look what they put into office. They put in a Marxist president, first time in our history that we know of. Lyndon Johnson was pretty close to that. He was favored. Jimmy Carter came out of nowhere, a peanut farmer. I don't know what he was. I don't think he was anything, but he was a moldable specimen of a human being who could be pushed like the doughboy and do whatever he was told to do, without creating waves.
Carter.
Every president, by the way, every president that ran since Roosevelt has always said, even Richard Nixon, when I get in office, I'm going to clean out the State Department. Well, why did they pick on the State Department? Because the State Department controls foreign policy. State Department is the one that supplied through Alger Hiss, supplied every member, like 100 people, to the United Nations for the United States to serve in different offices. Alger Hiss put his cronies in there. So why are we even in the United Nations? Has that changed today? Why would it?
Well, I think...
Oh, yeah, well, you can say they died out. Well, sure, but who did they appoint? If you're a communist agent, a Kremlin agent, Soviet agent, if you're in office secretly as what we call a mole, then when you get older, who do you, as you hire people in under you, your underlings, in every office you can hire them for, who do you hire? Marxists, communists, your brothers, your political allies. And these people hire more and more other allies. They're not going to hire a Barry Goldwater, conservative thinking person. That would be doomsday if you applied for a government job and tried to get into the State Department. You can't do it. So they apply. Like one person said, you know, we're overloaded with socialists, and everybody knows this now. People are becoming aware the country is overloaded with socialists. And the thing is that I have said this before, and I've now heard other people saying, I said it 20 years ago, a socialist is nothing more than a communist without an AK-47. That's it. Because they cannot really control things without the gun. And when they take up the gun, hey, it's Marxism, period. Socialist, Marxist. Communist, Marxist. President of the United States, an avowed Marxist, among other things. But there's no question of this. If somebody doubts that, that's not, I'm telling you this, but there's a book out called the Manchurian, not the Manchurian Candidate. That's an old movie with, I forget who it was, Frank Sinatra?
Frank Sinatra, yeah.
Yeah, okay, but it's called the Manchurian President. If you have not read the book, I advise your listeners to get on Alibris, ALIBRIS.com, which is a place to get secondhand or used books, new books, and so on at a cheap price. You can probably buy it for $5. It's a hardbound book. Total expose on Mr. Obama and all of his underlings who he appointed as, get this, how many times has the President of the United States appointed people and called them czars over different departments? Nobody. How many times has Khrushchev done this? Or all of the Russian dictators? That's what you have in Russia. You have czars over different departments. Not not America. But they appointed people and call them czars. Well, hey, why? But anyway, like I said, you go all the way back to Lyndon Johnson, and he said, hey, I'm further to the left than Eleanor Roosevelt. And he proved it with his Great Society program. He didn't give a darn for the Constitution. He didn't give a darn for the Republic. And by the way, when you hear your congressman say, there's a great democracy we live in, hey, drop him a note. Call his office, drop him a postcard, email him, something to say, hey, read your literature, read your material. It's a republic, not a democracy.
Let's see. Let me use Benjamin Franklin's quote. Two wolves and a sheep voting on what's for dinner. And you know, one of my favorite things to do, you know, I'm a little bit confrontational at times. You know, I am 6'4" and I don't like bullies. And one of my favorite things is to go to a public meeting where somebody's running for office, and when they say our great democracy, I step up and I say, sir, excuse me, what Congress was it? Whose administration? Under what administration did we change our republic to a democracy?
Exactly. Good point.
And the strangest thing happens, Robert. I mean, I didn't really understand it until I got in with a presidential candidate. Remember Charles Collins? You know, nobody ever knew Charles Collins was running for president, because every time he'd get up at the Republican Party and tell them we can buy back the Federal Reserve, we can shut out a $10 trillion debt, or $6 trillion back in that day, 14 trillion or something now, and that's our debt, that's our money. We don't owe it to them. We don't need to give it to them, and all we need to do is go back to good. Every cameraman on stage turned their cameras off and pointed them at the ground. When I mentioned something about a republic to a political candidate, the political candidate disappears. The cameramen disappear, and you got a crowd of people standing around looking, scratching their head, going, "What just happened?"
Well, when Stalin initially started this crap, when Stalin started years ago, his whole objective was to infiltrate government and take over the government by infiltrating with Soviet agents. Well, but one of the major thrusts was to infiltrate the media. Now look at the media today. They will now laugh and say, when this black man, Kane, is running for president, they will make every effort to disgrace the man, to discredit the man, to make such a big deal out of this supposedly making a pass at young ladies. Well, he was the head of the National Restaurant Association, and of course he says, he denies it, doesn't even know them. Well, I don't doubt it. The media is making a big deal out of this, and there's nobody to prove anything. It's just innuendos. It's made-up stories, perhaps. But they're playing it up as if it's fact, disgracing the man, making a fool of him, no matter what he says. On the other hand, when Mr. Obama ran for office, he was untouchable. There was no criticism of the man. Nothing that he did could say or question. When they asked him, what about Bill Ayers? What is your association with Mr. Ayers, who was a known communist, radical, bomb-throwing guy married to Bernadine Dorn, who's a radical bomb-throwing female back in the 60s, 70s, whatever. He said, oh, I just knew him in passing on the street. Well, it turns out that that wasn't the case. And that came out in the book I mentioned, The Manchurian President. This was researched, of course, by a European, a German, not an American. It was published. Hey, listen, it's an incredible book. Read it. It gives all of it, but it tells about Ayers. Ayers' children and Obama's kid went to the same private schools in Chicago. They worked together for years. Of course he knew Bill Ayers. But did the media question this? No. Hey, when the media said this, remember this, Clay? They said, oh, the Messiah, it's like the coming of the Messiah. That's what they said when this man spoke at the beginning of his campaign. Oh, it's like the coming of the Messiah. People are calling from the Messiah. Women are fainting at his speeches. They're passing out on the ground. That was not true. It was totally fiction, made-up crap by a left media. The reason I say left media, far left, is because they're so indoctrinated. People in it are indoctrinated with garbage, and they are the ones that came out of Harvard also, not just lawyers on, the plague of lawyers is what they called. The plague of lawyers came on Washington during the Roosevelt administration. They were accepted into government positions, all different. Agriculture, state were two of the major things that Stalin wanted to capture. Also, the media. So his agents were sent over to our media. Now, a lot of the media people, they're highly respected people, but that doesn't mean that doesn't mean they're patriotic Americans. I don't care if they wave a flag or not. They could be plants, and in many cases, by their words, their deeds, their actions, they are. So they're not helping the American cause. They're not telling the truth.
Well,
they have lies.
But you know, I feel the same way about the media, Robert. I mean, when I saw what happened at Waco, I was in Miami.
Oh, absolutely.
I had 3 boats out there. I had 4 businesses. I had 4 corporations. I was doing quite well, thank you. I started a motorcycle magazine and ran the story about the CIA drug dealing under George W. Bush. The Operation Watchtower, I got that documentation. I ran it in my magazine, and suddenly I was being threatened by the CIA. I believe Bush was actually... No, he wasn't quite president then. He wasn't quite president right then. He was going up against Bill Clinton, and Operation Watchtower told the whole story about the Mossad and the CIA arranging, using the special forces to build radio guide towers down in Colombia to guide planes into Albrook Air Force Base in Panama. Where Panama was controlled by Manuel Noriega. And that's the first time I got threatened by the CIA. This whole communist setup, Israel started by communists, by Marxists. You know, and we've had Jews write about that and talk about that. As a matter of fact, I just had one of them on my show the other day. Gilad Otzman, you know, renowned musician. This ain't about the. We're not talking about one. We're entering a world war, and they described it in my film, True Face of FEMA. I filmed the first Homeland Security meeting. We're in for a long war. It's going to be, said Colonel John Brinkerhoff of FEMA. It's going to be a long war, maybe longer than the Cold War, and it's going to be fought on American soil. And the enemy is weak. We'll use unconventional tactics. We'll have to do the same. We'll have to do the same. And in case of a single outbreak of smallpox, a earthquake, say along the New Madrid fault line, or a Hurricane Katrina, we'll need 400,000 well-armed, a single outbreak of smallpox in a major metropolitan area. We'll need 400,000 well-armed, well-trained, organized, disciplined troops to control the American people, because some of them just won't follow orders. In other words, some of us won't fall for the get your vaccines here at Walmart. Get your vaccines over here at Walgreens or Safeway. Yeah, we'll serve you up a little bit of mercury. It's actually a war against the American tanks And we're the ones now are in the streets demanding freedom. I feel like when I see the Occupy movements and the Tea Party movements, they've both been infiltrated. You know, during World War II, under the Roosevelt administration, we were partners with Uncle Joe Stalin, who murdered 60 million of white Russian Christians. And McCarthy was demonized because he was telling us that.
Well, remember, too, McCarthy was demonized for a purpose. But the point of it was, if you'll notice on the media, even now, you'll hear a person that is questioned of something they said, they'll say, oh, that smacks of McCarthyism. Well, that's the whole point. Or you are a McCarthyite. A McCarthyite is probably the worst thing, worse than being an atheist, worse than being a cop killer, and worse than being a criminal. Yeah, that's the whole thing. They wanted McCarthyism, McCarthyite, and so on to be coined words to make a point that no one dare question what McCarthy was questioning.
That's right.
And what was he questioning? McCarthy was simply exposing the infiltration of the government, the media, and so on, and our universities and so on, as Harvard. He was simply pointing out the names of these people. So, listen, it's just, the man was made an example so that and how many times, well, okay, the answer to this is, how many congressmen now have even questioned anything that McCarthy questioned? Nothing. Has the problem been solved? No. How many people were thrown out of government positions who were exposed as communist agents of the Kremlin, Soviet Union? None. They were transferred laterally in every case. One of the excuses of calling people McCarthyites and McCarthyism and why they hate Joe McCarthy, the left says, hey, people were jumping out of skyscrapers in New York committing suicide because of what this man did to them. Falsely accusing these people. Listen, McCarthy never falsely accused one person, and I say that because a few years ago, $10,000 reward was offered to anybody who could give a name of who was hurt, who jumped out of the skyscraper, who committed suicide because of McCarthy. No one came forward with anything. Nothing.
I think we had a few more people commit suicide with the stock crash during the Depression, engineered by the Federal Reserve.
There was one man, Clay, that jumped out of a skyscraper in New York, but he was, I believe he was he was going before the Senate Internal Security Subcommittee to be questioned about his communist background. Okay, so he either jumped out because he was scared, or they were going to nail him, or his cohorts in crime pushed him out because they thought he was a weak link in the chain. We'll never know. But in fact, the only person who ever committed suicide was a person who was exposed as a red and decided to end it all. He was going before the hearings. So there's no big thing. I mean, it's just, that's the way it is. Again, the $10,000 reward to name one person harmed by McCarthy. One person, nobody could come forward with a name, and that's the major accusation these people still to this day make, is they can't name anybody. Joe McCarthy was,
they have done the same.
He was assassinated with words.
They have done the same thing and tried to do the same thing with me to render me, my voice, to render my magazine. I mean, they eventually got me kicked out of all the bookstores and the magazine and all that. They blocked me in libraries. I'm on a list called abusive talk show, abusive host blacklist. So you can't get to the Free American, you can't hear the show in a library or at Intel or Intuit. It's the ADL has put out the word that I started the militia. Well, Robert, I did. They just don't tell you that I worked for the governor and that nobody in the militia that had anything to do with the militia, the militia blew up Oklahoma City. Timothy McVeigh was in the Army. Timothy McVeigh was a plant. Timothy, he had nothing to do with the militia. And the BATF, there wasn't a single BATF agent in the building when they blew it up. They were standing across the street. And the guy that was standing across the street reported, well, yeah, it's a good thing I had been trained over the last 2 or 3 months out there at White Sands Missile Range in ANFO bombs, and we were blowing up trucks and everything out there on White Sands. So I was able to recognize what happened.
Yeah.
And that's the same agency, by the way, folks, that attacked Waco, that attacked a church, that killed 17 little children, and is right now under investigation by the Congress for transferring weapons to drug dealers and drug cartels. Huh?
Well, the same thing happened with this man in who is that? I can't think of his name. His family was attacked by armed force. Tanks came in. He was living up on a mountain.
You're talking about Randy Weaver. Randy Weaver.
Randy Weaver. Yeah, I met Randy. I met his wife at these meetings, these Y2K things, and I talked to Randy quite a bit. And so much of that is the same people that did all this other stuff, but the truth never came out about it, and it never will, Clay, because the media is controlled to that extent. Period. You're not going to get through it. If the truth came out, heads would roll. They would have to roll in Washington, D.C. You know, this is it's really terrible. You know, this Brigadier General Andrew Gatsis in 1986 said this. He said, though aware of communist goal of world domination, the average citizen, American citizen, refuses to believe that the real threat comes from governmental officials and their non-governmental confederates who secretly espouse the same objectives as the openly avowed communists. I mean, he's saying what we're saying. This is a man who knows. Anthony Sutton, by the way, this is something for your listeners. There's a book called The Best Enemy Money Can Buy, written by Anthony Sutton, and it's a documentary. It's an unbelievable encyclopedic volume, a very interesting reading of all of the weaponry we have given to all of the communist nations throughout the world. And he's saying this. He said, now we have the formidable task of bringing these gentlemen to the bar of justice to publicly answer for their private and concealed actions. That's true. The media has never picked up on the fact that we supported all these people with money, with food, and with weapons. And in every case, we supported the Marxist government who eventually took over the country. It was a good example, close to our shores. Fidel Castro was played up in our media, and they knew better. They knew better as a agrarian reformer, a farmer. I mean, come on. Well, so was the man in China before they took over China. The media played the man up, the leader, as, oh, the Reds over there, the communists, the guerrillas are just agrarian reformers. They just want change. Well, they got change. They got a communist dictatorship locked up in the same way in Cuba with Fidel Castro.
They have done the same thing. They have done the same thing with Libya. Matter of fact, one of the people named in my books, Mossad agent Michael Harari, who's the one